Hi, I'm Jayreid. I'm a psychotherapist in San Francisco, California, and in today's video I'd like to discuss the fear that one is narcissistic themselves after having endured narcissistic abuse. I find that this is a common fear for those who've been raised by a narcissistic parent. The lingering dread that if they get close enough to someone, it will be revealed just how, in fact, narcissistic and selfish they are, rather than seeing themselves sort of without that misconception. And there's good reasons for that, I think, if they've endured narcissistic abuse, because the crux of that is having the narcissist's own selfishness, again, unconsciously by that narcissist, relocated into his or her victim. And that relocation process has been addressed in the video titled Psychology of the Narcissistic Parent. And so I'd encourage anyone to review that if they haven't seen it already, to kind of get into the meat of that relocation process, so that the narcissist, at least on the surface, ends up feeling spotless psychologically, emotionally, and the victim full of spots, stains, all the things the narcissist, his or herself, does not want to and cannot acknowledge nor feel about themselves. Today, I want to discuss, specifically why that dread of being selfish can be taken out of a childhood of narcissistic abuse. So, just again, a quick review of the psychology of the narcissist. They start with a core sense of worthlessness, which is combated by a conscious denial, in essence, conscious or unconscious, but in essence, a denial of that with the use of boosting themselves artificially. In fact, it's sort of boosting themselves so high it doesn't qualify as good self-esteem, but more what we call grandiose self-esteem, or artificially inflated. And secondly, they expect others will comply with that grandiose sense of themselves and mirror back what they are insisting they are, which is sort of above and beyond what sort of any human can rightly claim. In the course of this kind of psychological organization, there's this tricky sort of implication, not that tricky, but it's subtle, I should say, where in essence their needs, their opinions, their point of view feel to them more important than basically everyone else's, particularly if they're the head of a household and they're, it's in reference to a child. And if that child's needs do not if those child's needs diverge from the parents, well, to that parent, the narcissistic parent, that's seen as sort of the ultimate insult. Because how in the world could someone else's needs be different than theirs? And if they are, then that person must be incredibly selfish, not them. And it seems logical and coherent to the narcissist, because to them, all that matters is their own needs. So anyone else asserting theirs, by definition, is breaking an important law to the narcissist, and typically is taken to task for that. One of the ways it typically happens in a childhood of narcissistic abuse by a parent is that the child who's the parent's target hears the word selfish said at them all the time. Just, at any point, and it can be unpredictable, but it's not a matter of if, but when they're going to be accused of being selfish. It really gets under the skin of a kid, or can, where this is often the justification for all the other emotional abuse the child faces. So the child may be getting screamed at for leaving clothes on the floor, or failing to take the trash out as they were told to, failing to get a permission slip signed to go on a field trip, whatever it may be. Honest mistakes are claimed to be acts of supreme selfishness, which the parent is now justified to sort of cure the child of this selfishness. This sort of justification allows the therapist, the parent, to relocate their own sense of worthlessness in the child. The logic goes, the child is selfish. Therefore, and this maybe wouldn't be stated overtly, but they're worthless. And if they're worthless, then it's the parent's not only opportunity, but they might claim duty to berate, belittle, even terrorize that child for being so selfish, under the sort of thin guise that they can prevent the child from being selfish going forward. It can be very adaptive for the child victim of this kind of narcissistic abuse to believe that they in fact are selfish, because doing so maintains the hope that if they were just something else, in this case not so selfish, they wouldn't be being so horribly treated by the parent. Things wouldn't be so hopeless. They get to retain that hope. And for a child who's going through, every day at home where they're sort of getting unprotected by this type of a narcissist, some semblance of hope is essential for survival. And I do believe that adopting the belief, unconscious typically, that they are in fact selfish, and that is why they're getting screamed and yelled at, and if only they weren't so selfish they wouldn't be, is a very important survival strategy. Typically, once this kind of a childhood is survived, and I'm speaking as a therapist for folks who've typically as adults have come in and are ready and are in a position of safety, psychological and emotional, enough safety to begin sort of untangling what they were put through. The myth of their own selfishness gets quickly sort of brought into treatment and disabused. It's no small feat though. So one of the costs of having to adopt the belief that I'm the selfish one as a child, or even I'm the narcissistic one, is that they're in fact not. For whatever reason, these children or the victims of narcissistic abuse tend to have high capacities for empathy, incredible emotional resilience, and genuinely care about the feelings of other people. So the prospect of discovering that yes, they are in fact narcissistic would feel devastating. It's kind of like that, saying that if you worry you're insane, then you're not. It's a lot like that. So what I have found is that in the start of therapy, if one has been narcissistically abused and this sort of term selfish has been weaponized against them, the arrangement of therapy poses its own threat, because you're there to sort of talk about yourself. And like in this case, let's say it's me, and I'm listening to this person for 50 minutes, per week, the therapeutic hour. And it can often feel, again, like it's a matter of when, not if, I say or insinuate that, well, you're really so focused on yourself. You're taking up all this time just speaking about what's important to you. You haven't thought at all about what I'm thinking, what I need, all of these things. And, I think it's good and accurate news that is never going to be coming, say, from me. And I don't think I'm that unique, really. I mean, most people are not narcissistic in this sort of severe manner. So victims get to find out over time that they have a whole lot more runway with people than they ever did with their narcissistic abuser. But nonetheless, it can feel very dangerous as they're sort of testing that, particularly in therapy. I found that one of the singular most curative elements in therapy is the identification of ways that a victim of narcissistic abuse fears they themselves are narcissistic, and the overt disconfirmation of those fears, suspicions, or even beliefs. I thought I wanted to discuss this today because it's such a common thread in the in the process of recovering from narcissistic abuse. And there's sort of in the zeitgeist, at least in the psychological zeitgeist, some of the zeitgeist, I guess, this idea that, you know, the apples don't fall very far from their trees. So if you've had a narcissistic parent, it's very likely you yourself are narcissistic. Or if you don't seem to be, well, with enough digging, we'll find out just how narcissistic you are. And I think it's important to sort of get the message out that there is real discontinuity across the generations at times. And I don't know, you know, I'm not qualified, I guess, to really get into why that's the case. But I see it time and again. You know, just because someone's been treated terribly by a narcissistic parent, they do not, oftentimes, I mean, many people do not pay that forward in their own lives. And it's sort of, I think, important and very, very like, you know, satisfying, actually, I think, for all parties to help disprove that fear that sort of I'm as bad as my abuser. And I think that's a conclusion that one can come to fairly early and often in psychotherapy for narcissistic abuse. So hope this nuance of recovery from narcissistic abuse resonates with some people, and I look forward to posting more videos. Hope everyone's safe and taking care of themselves through this pandemic, and take care.